And what's happening in Ukraine and around all of this today? Denis Elisevich, it's a pleasure to greet you. Good afternoon, Denis.
Hello, Alexander, Dennis, and viewers.
Welcome.
I don't know if it makes sense to ask you how you're doing, Denis, because as I understand it, things aren't going so well. Today I hear there is some bad news from Ukraine. Is that correct?
What exactly are you talking about?
I'm talking about the fact that I just received information that today there were record-breaking strikes again using ballistic missiles. Yes.
It's definitely, it happens all the time. And of course, it's bad news, but it's constant bad news, consistently bad news.
Then the first question is for Denis. Ask Denis Elisevich. If Donald Trump really asked Vladimir Putin not to strike the energy sector for a week, can today's strike be considered a direct violation of that promise?
I wasn't at the agreements. I saw it published that the discussion lasts until February 1st, up to and including Sunday, since Monday is the 2nd. And he didn't mention the exact agreements because of Trump.
Yes, I also specifically checked today. Many commentators, in fact, are commenting in exactly this way, that supposedly this deadline has ended. Therefore, nothing prevents the Russian Federation from striking energy infrastructure and facilities in Ukraine.
Yes.
Absolutely, of course, this is very, very regrettable. Indeed, it feels like, especially for a country that truly suffered, I believe, during World War II, the Great Patriotic War. Yes, from this kind of blockade, and we all know and remember very well what the blockade of Leningrad was like, how people froze there. But somehow this doesn't stop today's current Russian leadership from taking similar measures. And this cynicism, which is literally being voiced, I just remember a statement when all this just started. I mean, when talks began about this so-called truce. I think nothing hit there for about a week, at least no infrastructure targets.
In Kyiv and the region, they were there. Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes, these statements that, well, yes, but like, it's not really beneficial for us, this whole not really beneficial thing honestly sounded so cynical. And somehow it seems like we should get used to everything, but unfortunately we'll probably never get used to this. And today's victims, it wasn't just a strike, people died there too. And on top of that, I think there were buses involved. Yes, the one that was hit yesterday or the day before, it's all very sad, of course.
Denis then asked Elisevich, or Denis, I would say Elisevich, why then? Against this backdrop, the United States, Ukraine, and Russia are meeting again in Abu Dhabi right now.
I always try to explain what happens after each shelling so people understand. During active negotiations like now, almost everything, 99% is like this. That's how negotiations work. Putin wants peace, right? Who said that Putin wants peace? First, second, Putin shelled Ukraine hard yesterday, especially Kyiv and the region. The increase in people's discontent and the worsening humanitarian catastrophe improve Putin's negotiating position at the table, let's say tomorrow or the day after. Of course, it improves, not worsens. So will Putin strike to improve his terms or avoid striking to worsen them? These things are terrible, but we must be realistic and explain this to others. When someone sits there during war with no global truce, they get upset by how war is desired, how negotiations happen, and how real life works. I don't like it either. My relatives and friends are under shelling without power or heat. But we need to discuss the real situation, not spread propaganda and talk about how bad Putin is as if someone in the world doesn't already know that.
Oh, how I love our chat. Russia strikes carefully so as not to harm the civilian population in Ukraine. I mean, there are still people who believe this, and I think there are quite a few of them.
Russia is half.
You were all silent when the Ukrainian armed forces targeted energy infrastructure in Crimea and Donbass in 2014. Don't compare, well, as I understand it, don't compare the blockade of Leningrad and the current situation in Kiev. Well, yes, indeed, there are a huge number of people who in fact still believe in this. Because Russia is only targeting military sites precisely, any other strikes are either by the Ukrainian armed forces or fakes, as I understand it. By the way, Dennis, I wanted to ask you about fakes. Did you happen to see, I think it was just yesterday or the day before? If I'm not mistaken, that's the First Federal Channel. So they were talking about an alleged article in two major French publications. It's Le Parisien, I think, and another one that I can't remember right now. On the cover, there's a portrait of Zelensky, and the headlines say that Zelensky is the only one who doesn't want peace. Why should the whole world wait for one person?
And then,
as it turned out, it was a complete fake, and this is being broadcast on the main Russian channel Le Parisien. It turns out that all of this, here's the text, it was all written by them, and the cover accordingly was simply made in Photoshop. It's unclear why this was done, but still, I think it's very important for people to understand that the situation with the war doesn't depend only on Volodymyr Zelensky. Even today, unusually not from Volodymyr Zelensky.
The situation at the negotiations today doesn't depend only on Volodymyr Zelensky and only on Volodymyr Zelensky.
All right, Dennis, look, here is some literally fresh information. Ukraine has agreed with the United States and Europe on a military response to violations of the ceasefire by Russia. There are several phases outlined there. We can talk about this in more detail later, but the thing is, Russia is already rejecting this plan. It's already rejecting this plan. Here's the big question. Who opposes peace here, Zelensky or Putin? So, what does Zelensky need to do? What exactly should he agree to? Give up all the regions that Putin is asking for, completely give up on security guarantees. We see this security in action today in the energy sector. The main question is whether it's worth trusting. Honestly, I don't really understand why this depends only on Zelensky.
I'm not suggesting that we should trust Putin.
I've never said anything like that. We're talking about what the real conditions for peace are, the conditions for real peace. I don't like it, and no reasonable person likes it. Compromise. No territories are negotiable or to be given to Putin. You mentioned something that's not on the agenda. On the agenda are 20% of Donbas, not the whole Donbas, since we don't control all of it anyway, but 20% of Donbas, which are uninhabitable territories that we do control. And what's being discussed is a free economic zone. If Zelensky comes out tomorrow and says, I agree to this, then peace will be achieved.
But does Putin agree to this, Dennis? I don't think he agrees to it. Mikhail, it's not about any economic zone. I think he didn't mention anything like that, no.
It's not his wish. A free economic zone, that's Trump's proposal, a compromise, yes, and that's your delegation.
Tell me, please, Dennis, based on what you just said, if someone asks, yes, who is actually setting the agenda for the meeting in Abu Dhabi, Kyiv, Washington, or Moscow?
Well, of course, Washington and the KGB and KVN are just continuing their own games. I'm not going to be Putin's lawyer. Well, I'm not expecting Putin or the KGB to come out and say, you know, we agree to this and we agree to that. Yes, they'll push and annoy you about everything. I just accept that's how it is. But I know what the key issues are right now, and the main issue is compromise, territorial compromise.
The end. Yesterday, we had Mikhail Svetov as a guest who said that, in his opinion, only America is interested in ending the war. Everyone else, both Ukraine and Russia, the end, are not interested in that. Do you agree with this?
Well, more or less, yes.
Only
not Russia, Ukraine, but Zelensky, Putin, let's say Russia, Ukraine. Nobody asked
what would be considered a failure of the meeting in Abu Dhabi for Ukraine.
Yes, I believe for us, anything except reaching a framework agreement is a failure. That's what failure means for us. I received very positive information last weekend. While I can't share all the details, it lets me look to the future with optimism. But keep in mind that Putin and Zelensky can still surprise us.
Interesting. You said it's not Russia, Ukraine, but Putin and Zelensky. Nobody asked the people, right? Well,
Of course, if people were asked, all of Ukraine today would be for ending the war. Right now, I should be on air saying, let's not do this. Not being on the front lines, I'll be telling you, let's not give up 20%, and not just give up, but withdraw our own. The question is, let's not withdraw while our people are dying from the cold right now. Well, in my opinion, that's a bit wrong.
That's not the question. The real question is if Russia is ready. So you say,
Dennis, excuse me, but leaving Donbas is being discussed at the negotiating table. If the delegations are talking about it, Russia probably agrees. And when we accept this condition, Putin will start acting up. They'll say, no, we don't agree. I'll come to you and say, Putin is a jerk. He doesn't agree.
Dennis, how can the transit of Russian oil through Ukraine until 1929 be justified during the war?
There are two sides to this coin. The first side is real life, and this is what it looks like. You negotiate, well, I mean, not you personally, but Ukraine, Israel negotiate with terrorists, because that's how life is. Negotiations have to be held. Ukraine and its state enterprises have an agreement with Rosneft or another Russian party to pump oil through Druzhba to Slovakia and Hungary. We're discussing this agreement lasting until 1929, and Shmihal confirmed it will be honored until then. I'm not shouting to break it because I understand how real life works. But is it moral when the state does this to fine people for Russian songs or Russian music for those who listen to it? Right now in Ukraine, is it moral to ban the Russian language? Is it moral to force everyone at 9 a.m. to have a minute of silence just for show in Ukraine? No, that's immoral. That's my view. And if real life there forces you to pump Russian oil through Druzhba, then on the other hand, you need to stop these fakes, stop the fake life, and stop portraying it in films. If you've seen Don't Look Up, that dystopian film, bringing that to life in Ukraine, that's what's happening in Ukraine today.
So regarding Shmihal, yes, Shmihal's statement about continuing the oil transit is a forced measure. I'm asking you, or is it a moral failure?
No, it's a forced measure and a moral failure.
What has a stronger influence on the authorities' decisions today? International contracts or still the loss of human lives?
No, these are separate ideas. International contracts play a role, but how does loss of life factor into this? This would have been affected if they had refused to pump the oil, but they didn't.
Another question, Dennis, from your point of view, does the transit of Russian oil during the war look like financing the aggressors? Are you asking?
It may seem that way, but I want to stress again, that's what real life is like.
Unfortunately. And also, why did Ukraine stop the gas but continues to allow the oil through? What's the fundamental difference? Dennis, yes.
I have no idea. I think there are some technical agreements there and possibly Orban's influence on Trump, for example, but I don't know all the agreements. I don't want to guess.
Does the Ukrainian government realize what message they're sending to society and the front by discussing oil until 1929?
Yes, the authorities don't care. The government absolutely doesn't care. Right now, the government in Ukraine is doing things like this. Today, for example, I released a video about the bill proposed by Prime Minister Svyridenko. Yes, the government disrespected the nation long ago and will do whatever it wants. Did you hear that Yulia Mendel, Zelensky's former press secretary now living in America, wrote 2 posts? One of them is a huge post about how Yermak practices occultism and various similar things. This is a person who is the second most important figure in the state. There was a lot. This could possibly lead to some kind of success.
after Epstein's lists, nothing is surprising anymore. By the way, these secret files are not there. Zelensky...
He's not listed as an island participant, but appears elsewhere.
Thank you. Isn't the negotiation in Abu Dhabi turning into an imitation of dialogue? Is there actually no real dialogue there? No.
It's definitely not an imitation. It's definitely happening there, and everything is very serious.
Why are the negotiations taking place in the Emirates and not in Europe or the United States? Is that all?
Europe is not a real party to the negotiations today. Trump basically sidelined them, so it wouldn't make sense for this to happen in Europe. Many Arab countries have good relations with both Ukraine and Russia, or rather with the leadership of Ukraine and Russia. And by presenting themselves, including to the United States, as a neutral, comfortable, and safe side, that's how things are today.
Listen, I have a question, Denis, regarding Fédération Internationale de Football Association. Why is Fédération Internationale de Football Association discussing Russia's return to sports during the war? That's one question. I'll also ask you about some last names I don't know.
Here I can even explain.
Yes, why not?
Well, I don't know, Nenis.
If you mean Infantino, what did he tell Russia? Yes.
About Infantino and his statement, yes?
Well, that's what real life looks like too. Trump has a lot of influence over Infantino, and that's one part of the bargaining. You see, Russia is purely a dictatorial authoritarian state, and for an authoritarian state, sports have always been important as a tool of propaganda, and it's very important for Russia to return to international competition. That's likely why Trump has already tempted Putin, suggesting they move forward so he can use his influence to bring him back. And that will be a huge advantage for Russia, and it will also be a way for Putin to thumb his nose at the Europeans just as he dreams of doing.
I'll just add a quick remark that it's a bit taken out of context there. It was about youth teams, and such discussions come up about once a year. But everyone understands perfectly well that without agreements reached regarding the war, of course.
Well, of course.
Russia won't be allowed in anywhere, even if Infantino agrees, because it's unrealistic.
Well, look, the question that Denis had is the following. Did Sibiga have grounds to call Infantino's position morally unacceptable? That's how the question sounded. Thank you.
Sibiga is involved in state propaganda and must act this way due to their policy. So you see, I think this isn't even something that deserves special attention. In my eyes, these are completely ordinary things, as someone who understands how everything works. Moreover, if someone is really expecting any kind of justice from UFA or Fédération Internationale de Football Association, these two dictatorial organizations, communist, just plain communist organizations, then no. In those organizations, money decides everything. They are self-proclaimed and chaotic.
Well, look, here.
I even called them the most corrupt.
The most corrupt, of course, absolutely.
What does Russia's return to football mean for the victims of the war?
Alexandra, you see, if people keep holding on like this, they'll lose their minds.
Well, of course.
You have to accept the world as it is. There will be a lot of injustice. There will be a lot of injustice. Moreover, I'll tell you, Russia, as our bad neighbor, isn't going anywhere. Putin might go away, and he will in a few years, but Russia won't. And you need to understand that we'll have to keep living next to them somehow and not allow a war to happen. Ideally, we could even love each other, but at least avoid hostility, since that always leads to trouble. This thought is also very difficult for me to accept today. We need to view the world realistically. The sooner everyone does, even if it's unpleasant, the better things will be. If we keep hyping things and saying, it's all over there, well, Germany somehow returned to normal life after Hitler. You see, it's an inevitable process. Germany isn't a pariah country. Moreover, Germany is #1 in the European economy today. And let's think about why Russia's resource-based economy is half the size of Germany's non-resource-based economy. Consider why Ukraine, once a victor, is now poor, while Germany, despite defeat and many problems, is now a leading country. But nevertheless, it means we need to sit down and think.
Thank you. Well, I don't know. They're asking me to ask you a question. Ask Denis why Russia wasn't accepted into NATO in 2007 if NATO is a defensive alliance.
I only have my own version about this, why Russia wasn't accepted either in 2007 or in 2001 or at any time. Because everyone understands perfectly well that Russia is ultimately a KKB, which is focused only on coming in, stealing technologies, and creating an extensive network of agents. And so they are basically incapable of playing fair. That's why, in my opinion, they weren't allowed inside the structure. Nobody wants to see cheaters at the table.
People really latch onto words. I remember a broadcast. You might have been a guest. You said that people sighed during the war, like they write about it, asking what right you had, and then the second word, sigh, and you. In your last broadcast with your friend, I don't know where you were. You said that Ukrainian men sighed during the war. I think you were talking about different men, both Ukrainian and Russian. That's what I think.
I can say even now that the authorities are leading on both sides. Sighing in war is exactly sighing when you are being forced absolutely in a pointless war. That's exactly what sighing means. If I were on the front line, I'd be sighing too. That's exactly what it is. If someone mentions a girlfriend, they're just trying to provoke. I don't know what girlfriend they're talking about. I have none. Let's just ignore people like that.
Yes, Dennis.
Yes, I wanted to ask Dennis, since we've already mentioned this agreement, well, I mean the coordination, yes, together with the United States and Europe. Here's the military response to Russia's ceasefire violation. How will Dennis respond, and is it realistic to implement?
Wait, are you talking about these new agreements that were made? Yes, yes, yes.
The latest ones.
Yes, I'm into all of that. You see, you're talking about it. I want all of that signed on paper, you know, what Ryuta just said about how strong everything is and all that, but let them sign it. But I know that in the end, it won't work. Nothing will work except for a successful and prosperous Ukraine. Everything else will be violated sooner or later if we are a weak and poor country. Thank you.
Well, I don't know. We've probably already asked these questions. For some reason, I have the feeling that everyone here is just trying to get to the bottom of things. Regarding your Israeli citizenship,
I can wait with this approach. I'll make a comment about it.
go ahead.
Dennis and I talked about this topic, and he's absolutely right. He said that his private life is nobody's business at all, whether he has Turkish citizenship or Israeli or Mexican. That's entirely his own business. And here,
You see, they're asking in a very sneaky way.
let them ask as they like. But Dennis, honestly, why should he discuss his private life?
Here, they're asking specifically as a public figure, as someone involved in politics. So, from this point of view, they're not just asking about private life, but as someone engaged in social and political activities. As I understand, Dennis isn't openly involved in social or political activities.
I have a question. For example, what does it actually change? Let's say Dennis has 10 citizenships. I'm just speaking figuratively. Or, for example, I have Israeli and Canadian citizenships. How does that affect the situation?
And here's the answer.
So, how is that?
And here's the answer. And the answer is that both Mindich and Zuckerman were also citizens of Israel and have now moved there. And what guarantee is there that Denis Elisevich, soon entering big politics, won't do the same?
Dennis, sorry that we're talking about you in the third person while you're here. I have a question. Let's say Dennis moved to Israel, just as an example. Dennis has a passport, he left. What happens next?
No, what I mean is he stole billions or millions of dollars and went to Israel.
That's what I mean. Dennis, well, tell me, please, now that you've become a very popular blogger, your channel is growing rapidly, right? Not just day by day.
We already have 1,500 people watching us by the hour.
Which for me, for example, is something, obviously what you're saying is interesting to people. People are interested. So when we started the broadcast, I saw a globe of people listening to you. Dnipro, Mykolaiv, Sumy, Israel. Well, I can't remember them all right now. I could name a whole list. Since the channel is growing so much and people are coming to listen to you, it means you're saying things people believe in. And at the same time, those who want to ruin your life and reputation start asking things like, what citizenship do you have? How many billions do you have? How do you react to that, or do you react at all?
No, I don't react, and I suggest you don't react either with such success. Now someone could claim I have a Russian or Zimbabwean passport, and I'd have to defend myself against anything someone makes up, even though nothing has happened yet. They suggest I'll come to power, steal $1 billion, and flee to Israel, which I won't. That's just not serious.
I completely agree with that. I just don't understand these stupid questions at all. Well,
haters, but he's still watching the broadcast right now. He watches every show, yours and mine, from beginning to end. Also, you said the channel is growing, but it's not. Growth is slow, about 2,000 subscribers a month, which is much slower than before.
Well, maybe I
don't make a lot of content
like I used to before.
5-10K a month channel growth.
Tell me, please, I have a question for you. Gennady Balashov, yes, his channel was growing incredibly at one point, then it kind of slowed down and then it started growing again. Although, in my opinion, he had a large audience. What do you think it depends on? So I look at your audience and it's mostly from Ukraine. Well, probably not only from there, but still a large number are from Ukraine. You track on your channel who your listeners and viewers are the most.
Yes, of course.
Mainly Ukraine, yes?
Of course, yes, Ukraine dominates.
And tell me, Russians listen to you 5%. 5% and Ukraine is 5%? Or is there also America? No.
There's America, all the European countries, especially Germany and Poland, wherever our people are.
I understand. Thank you very much. I want to ask you.
Here's a specific question. I don't know. Honestly, I'm not really familiar with the topic either. Thank you. Are there any differences between Vyacheslav Chernovoy's and Denis Yelisevich's programs? No.
I don't recall Vyacheslav Chernovoy's program. People there heard that some points overlap. For example, Chernovol discussed federalizing Ukraine and allowing local authorities to decide on language issues without politicizing them. I didn't see his program since I was a child and don't remember. The world has changed, and these are different programs with some possible overlap.
Now, Dennis, let me ask you something else about this, if I may. Well, we've already asked you, haven't we? Should we ask again? Does Ukraine really have the possibility to break the oil contract without catastrophic consequences?
No, if such possibilities existed, they would have already broken it again. I can only tell you, well, people are sitting there now, banging their heads against the wall. It's super unfair. From a conceptual point of view, it's super wrong. That's what real life is like. People avoid reality, preferring a movie, a fairy tale, or a perfect world instead. No, the world isn't perfect. It just is.
Where does Dennis draw the line? The red line after which no agreements can justify the authorities' decisions anymore.
Authorities have no clear boundaries now. Anyone can simply set their own limits. This concerns the fate of a major European country where hundreds of billions of dollars and tens of millions of lives have been invested. A geopolitically crucial and complex country in a complicated region, but why set any red lines for anyone? Some expect America to bomb Russia now, but that's not happening.
By the way, that was the next question. How likely is a situation regarding the relationship between Russia and the United States in connection with Ukraine? And how far could these relations go in a negative sense, if at all?
If Putin keeps irritating Trump, likely with Zelensky, Trump might withdraw and retaliate against both from the sidelines. While Russia and Ukraine fight, Trump will seek personal revenge on Putin and Zelensky from the sidelines, using all his tools.
You just said that Trump has all the tools for this. Is he using these tools today or not?
Trump, slowly with Zelensky, they're taking away power step by step, tightening the vise. We've discussed this already. The political and military situation in Ukraine is complicated right now. As for Putin, he knows the signals. We saw what happened with the Senev fleet, and in Venezuela, we know what will likely happen in Iran, and Cuba is probably next. A full package of sanctions is ready. It just hasn't been put on the agenda yet, so that's the minimum we're talking about. India, you remember those negotiations?
And do you think anything will happen regarding Iran?
Well, I basically believe in it, yes. Because if it doesn't happen, then, although now today I already hear that Iran agrees to completely stop its nuclear program. But it seems to me that when there is an opportunity to finish off such a regime, it should be finished off.
We have debates tomorrow. Dennis, this is Leon Weinstein and Alexander Golfa, and the announced topic is Trump. Is it evil, Dennis? Remind me.
Evil, or I would say simply good. But to be more precise, I'll tell you now whether it's evil or a gift of fate.
From your perspective, is evil truly evil or a gift of fate, Dennis?
Well, in my understanding, it's a gift of fate. In my understanding, it's life.
Can I ask why?
If Kamala had come, Democrats would have advanced the globalist agenda further. The war in Ukraine would have dragged on, with limited weapons and money supplied, and 18 to 22-year-olds forced to fight. Ukraine would have been doomed with no options, and peace talks wouldn't have been considered.
That's enough for me. Tell me, please, you just said the war would have been endless. Do you consider the current war in Ukraine to be endless? And if not, then when will it end?
Well, the end will definitely be this year, 100%.
Why do you think it will be this year, Dennis?
All available public and private information points to that. Secondly, there's a humanitarian catastrophe in Ukraine. People usually associate a humanitarian catastrophe only with winter, but you also have to think about summer, when there's no electricity. There are a lot of nuances there, and there's no one left to fight in Ukraine. I don't think many people remain on the streets. Eventually, the question will come up. Will they have to force very young people to the front? But doing that would require a barrier squad and become a nightmare.
Dennis, how much do you think the likelihood of the war ending this year, just the war ending regardless, how much is it connected to the elections, the November elections in the United States? So let's say there are two options. Trump supporters win, the Republicans, or on the other hand, the Democrats. So to what extent do peace agreements depend on this, or will either side just ignore it depending on the result?
I think the elections in the United States, even to some extent, depend indirectly on the military situation. It's in Trump's interest to end them because that would be one of his fulfilled promises, one of his most powerful fulfilled promises. He'll be able to say that cooperation with Ukraine on minerals will continue. Many other things will sort of compensate for the expenses the country incurred during Biden's war. Overall, this is a clear advantage for Trump and the Republicans. I believe that elections in Ukraine will take place at the end of spring or in the summer, even before the midterm elections, not just the end of the war, but elections in Ukraine.
But do ordinary Americans really care about what's happening between Russia and Ukraine, or have they, so to speak, already forgotten about it?
No, they are interested.
They are interested, yes.
Yes, and accordingly,
Trump's role is also interesting to them in this. Yes, yes.
yes.
I'll ask you a question, Dennis. I don't understand. Can Ukrainians who fled to Canada be sent to this war? What is this about? I don't get it.
Yes, Sasha.
Yes. Did you understand this question?
Yes, I thought this was on the agenda now.
Thank you.
Zelensky recently suggested in an interview that Europe should help return men for the front. Ukrainian propaganda now urges Europe and the world to deport all Ukrainian men back for the war. It's reached a level of madness.
Where was this? I didn't hear that in the interview. Dennis, this was recent.
Yes, a few days ago, late last week.
And that's exactly what I wanted to ask you about, Dennis. After all, the United States also has a special program for refugees from Ukraine, just like in Canada. But in Canada, for example, to be honest, I don't even know right now if it's still working or not. Some people say no, others say it's not being extended, so everything is uncertain. But what about the United States? What's happening there?
Well, in Canada, the program for Ukrainians has definitely been cancelled. And in America, they definitely aren't accepting any new people who entered under that program. From what I hear around me, it's a widespread problem. They have a widespread problem, and people are leaving voluntarily.
Just like in Canada, yes.
If you have no questions, you go first, then I'll follow. Thanks.
I just have a question, purely rhetorical. Does Dennis think this is right or not, fair or not, regarding those who left Ukraine? Because, well, the war isn't over there.
It's completely unfair and wrong to allow migrants in. It's completely from an anti-civilization. Instead of letting white Christians live in peace, it's absolutely illogical.
Well, yes, especially since people here are already starting to get used to it, settle in. Some are even getting jobs and working, or, well, people are already adapting somehow. And here it's not clear, no.
What kind of question is that? Ukrainians who came to live in Canada, if we're talking about Canada under a special program and Canada accepted them, what does that mean?
It's considered temporary, it is. The idea is that this program is just for the duration of the fighting, for the time being. Exactly, yes, of course. But they aren't accepting new ones anymore. But those who already had it,
I'll say it again.
Things are always changing there.
That's not quite right. The immigration program in Canada is as follows. Today, they no longer give money like they used to for entering Canada. Dennis, people used to enter through a program called QED. People used to get money there, like a one-time benefit of $3,000 per adult and $1,500 per child, as far as I know. That money isn't available anymore. The claim that Canada has rejected Ukrainian refugees is, in my view, complete nonsense. And as for not giving out money, well, I can explain why that happened, because not everyone who received that money stayed in Canada. And that money was sort of well, how should I put it, a benefit to help people start their lives. People would get the money and then leave with it. Yes, they are called travelers who kind of use the money to cover their expenses, but that's not what the money was meant for. That was still during the time of Trido Denis. Here's a question. How far can Trump go in putting pressure on Russia? And isn't he afraid of deeper cooperation between China and Russia? What's the logic here? Here's a tougher question. Wouldn't it make more sense to abandon Ukraine?
No, that's exactly it. That's why people don't get why Trump hasn't fully pressured Putin yet and is doing it gradually. That's why Trump now has to balance things from all sides, no matter how tough or radical he is, because that's what the situation requires. If his hands were untied, he'd act very differently, but the situation is complicated.
I just want to remind you, Sasha, regarding the QAED program, it has been completely shut down since July 2015.
Yes. Unfortunately.
Yes, as I mentioned, they might extend it. There are these moments, it's completely unclear. The key points for 2025, 2026, there are a lot of things that the extension depends on and so on. But it's very difficult to do this now.
Yes, I agree with you, but the extension, what I meant is that the extension of these visas exists, and people who already live here, who entered through this program. You're right, Dennis, that's what you said. They work, they study, they build their families, and instead of this program, they get a work visa or a student visa, stay to study or work in Canada, and then obviously get permanent residency. I'm not talking about those who left right away and want to come back again, but about those who stayed and live here. I know a lot of people like that. And by the way, you know, Dennis, the people who live here, I talk to them often. And our colleague Alexei Stepanenko, he's also from Ukraine, from Kharkiv, and he came, so to speak, not so long ago, and Bogdan Terekanov, who came from Krasnodon. I asked them what their attitude is if they want to go back to Ukraine, and I didn't hear an answer. What's positive? Because Ukraine today isn't the most attractive place to live, in my opinion. Unfortunately, not at all.
Well, of course, but I mean that people are leaving voluntarily because they're afraid of being forcibly deported. And usually, obviously, there's a man in the family. And there are already cases where people were deported from the United States to Poland. And from Poland, they were immediately handed over to the TCC, directly into the hands of the TCC in Ukraine. People have heard these stories. I don't know how true they are or not. And of course, they're scared and worried.
Ask Dennis, if Dennis is talking about the war ending this year, what is the main reason for such a statement? We're all waiting for this, for the war to end.
Public and non-public information. I just mentioned the public and obvious reasons, like there's no one left to fight, a humanitarian catastrophe, no money, no weapons, nothing at all. Actually, there's only Zelensky who wants to go for another presidential term, and right now he's not even bargaining for 20% of Donbass, he's bargaining for what Trump might give him. First, the green light to run, and second, give me a bonus, Europe and Trump, so I can move forward. He expected and requested this bonus and secretly demanded European Union membership. Then he would go to the elections, sign the agreement, withdraw from Donbass and say, I did it. A historic president, he ended the hybrid war from 2013-2014 and led Ukraine into the European Union. I, Zelensky, vote for me. That was the plan. But Merz clearly said no, and no options.
And tell me, please, if the war ends, if it happens this year, what will happen to Zelensky? Will he stay in power? No.
No options. He won't remain in power or even live in Ukraine.
And what will happen?
Will it be some kind of exile? I would call it isolation. There will be isolation. He will have to become non-public, find a place to live. In his case, it will be very difficult to do.
I don't know.
Why he brings it all to this point?
Please tell me. And in this case, in this scenario, will there be any kind of relationship between Russia and Ukraine at all or not?
No, well, you understand they will be very complicated. At first, there probably won't be any, but it's a two-way street. I don't expect the Russian people who support Putin to repent or for Putin to repent. I'm not going to live in fantasies or have my head in the clouds. For me, just ending the hostility and the escalation from both sides would be enough. I'm not planning to be friends with Russia, but we all know the economy will affect everyone.
Tell me, please, from your point of view, you said yourself we understand how the economy works. How likely is it? This resentment that you understandably feel right now, can you let go of it today?
That will be very difficult. I think it could take over a year just to let go of the resentment. We're not talking about being friends right now. Let's take that off the table for today. As for becoming friends and improving relations, well, I believe that will start happening after Putin. I'm convinced of that.
Thanks. I have a question for Dennis. I'm not being sarcastic. I just want to hear his opinion. Why is Trump so close to globalists like Flynn, BlackRock, Amazon, and Mikkelkani?
So look, Amazon is the largest company, and whether you want to or not, you have to take people like that into account. It's the same with BlackRock. If you manage, what is it, 14 or 17 trillion dollars, whether you want to or not, you have to be taken into account. But people don't understand even more important things. BlackRock owns property in Russia, BlackRock owns property in Ukraine, and there will be even more. And the idea is that BlackRock will actually be one of the security guarantees because it's not profitable when there's a risk of shooting. For BlackRock's properties in Ukraine and Russia, BlackRock's ownership in Ukraine will guarantee security. As bad as it may sound, and regarding the globalists, if we see this Fink interviewing Musk for fun, then maybe the situation will change.
I don't know if I should ask you this question. Thank you. And you? Thank you. So, how would you give a future to Ukraine if Putin hasn't been able to fully take over even one region in Ukraine for the fifth year in a row, so to speak? And the fact that you kind of gave such an assessment of the future that Ukraine might remain a country. Only if the war ends this year, but if it continues, then the outcome will be, so to speak, even more tragic. In general, it's kind of a strange question. Well, people have doubts about whether the war will end this year and whether it should end and if that's the right thing to do.
No, well, doubts are absolutely normal. Everyone can have doubts. No one can believe me, you or anyone else 100%. Is it right to end it? I think only those involved should write such a position. What does it mean to end it properly? Hundreds of thousands of our people have died. A lot of territory has been lost. The economy, which barely existed, has been destroyed. The energy infrastructure has been wiped out. People are dying from hunger and cold. And that's still not enough. No, it's for the person asking. It should have ended in May 2022 or never started.
Well, yeah. When people find out the truth, will they hate Volodymyr Zelensky? Or on the contrary,
I hope most people already hate him anyway, but those, I call them green hamsters by analogy. So let them stay in their green glasses for a while, but the moment will come when they really find out things that will shock them.
Well, by the way, again, regarding the hatred towards Zelensky, I don't live in Ukraine, so maybe I don't have the right to say anything about this. But about a week ago, I noticed there were a lot of different short videos going around where people were recording from Kyiv, from Dnipro. In the background, you could see freezing apartments. And there, I don't know, they were simply cursing Zelensky. But in all of this, for some reason, I kept wondering, what does Zelensky actually have to do with it? Again, coming back to the question, well, he's not the one doing the bombing. So the fact that people are freezing in their apartments, the fact that children are freezing in their apartments, so when will this damn Volodymyr Zelensky finally die? I mean, it doesn't really make sense, in my opinion. Once again, I'm not judging anyone. I don't live in Ukraine. I have nothing to do with Ukraine. But still, I have this kind of question. And this take, in my opinion, is gaining more and more momentum.
Zelensky is to blame for everything, and more people are realizing it. I'm glad because the war could have ended sooner, and people wouldn't be bombed now. That's what Vladimir Zelensky is guilty of.
That's correct, but then the blame of the current Russian leadership gradually becomes less clear. Aren't you concerned that with such attitudes, say in a year, roughly speaking, this blame might be completely forgotten? Everyone will be blaming only the current Russian leadership, saying they're at fault for everything, while Putin isn't so bad. He even offered a ceasefire, so to speak, out of the goodness of his heart and helped the Ukrainians.
Look, the fact that Putin is bad doesn't mean that Zelensky is good. I agree, of course. When we speak like this, people will always remember Putin as an aggressor who attacked and killed many in Ukraine. As Ukrainian citizens, we can only influence our own president. As I told you here in the context of Tsimbalyuk, I can come on your show for 2 hours and talk about what a scoundrel Putin is, but it won't shake his position. But it will shake Zelensky's. Because I have some influence in Ukraine, on the audience in Ukraine, but I have no influence on Russians. And they've been completely suppressed. That's what I do. If I were Russian, I'd only be talking about Putin right now. It's clear who he is. The war could have been ended, and today people wouldn't be enduring such horrors as they are now. People, as Ukrainians, focus on their own president, trying to influence and judge him. With Putin, his identity is already clear. For most people, this isn't even a question. It never will be.
Thank you, thank you.
Is that so? That's the question. Will the potion defeat Russia?
Well, it's not popular to say this here, but many things, okay, I won't say it because I'm not Putin's advocate, but just, this meme, not everything is so clear cut. Don't act like you're all saints either. In terms of actions, a lot of what we see today could have been avoided during the course of the war if someone hadn't wanted escalation. But now that I've said this, someone will latch onto it and say, I'm almost justifying Putin. That's why I just avoid these things, because there are plenty of idiots around and those who try to document everything. Let me tell you something else now just to change the subject. Today, another court hearing was scheduled for my mom. It was scheduled for today, but it didn't take place. The prosecutor postponed it at the last moment, but she still had to go to court to check in. It's a shame I can't show you photos of the path she took. Dennis might find it interesting, the type of ice in her city today, and if it's even walkable. It's a small town where already 600 people have been recorded with fractures. Both central and local authorities must consider if continuing the war and living like this is worthwhile. This trial is happening because my video was reposted where I said Ukraine won't join NATO or the European Union since they're not accepting it, which turned out to be true. Everything is confirmed, yet the trial has dragged on for nearly a year and a half. Let's discuss if Volodymyr Zelensky is good or bad, and if such lawlessness can occur even with a good leader like him. Usyk, the famous boxer, recently arrived at boxing night in New York and took photos with two Russian boxers who support Putin and Kadyrov. He's allowed to do this, but it's not justifying Russian aggression. They're fabricating this charge against my mother.
Maybe.
And Zelensky, so let's not. But if we must, let's go ahead.
I have a question for you, Niz. Is it your mom who has complaints about the repost of the video you made, right?
She posted my stream with Hennady Balashov, may he rest in peace, on a Facebook page that nobody reads. There was 1 or 2 likes there, but besides that, there was a lot of other information that people liked in that stream. It got 300,000 views. In my view, that's my content, not hers. She reposted her son's content even though I always told her not to and she broke our agreement. All right, that's how it is. We've reached this point and she'll receive an article. Our whole family has been helping people who suffered more, especially in the Kyiv region, from the very first days. Not just from the first day, but from the very first hour of the war. That's how you did everything. But they'll send this article on Facebook. I just posted it. It's revenge against me. It's a fight against me. Messing with my mom is as low as it gets, rock bottom. If people cross those red lines, there's no reason to talk to them.
I absolutely agree with that. And what you said about that Ukrainian boxer, yes, he's currently in the United States, right? Did I understand you correctly?
Was he there or is he there now? There was a serious boxing match in New York the day before yesterday, and he
was there. I heard you recently had an interesting meeting. Last Friday, we had Maria Maksakova on the radio. Then Masha said she had them. She was invited by a pastor for a tour, sang in Washington, and performed duets with David Gvignonidze. She said she was going to see you and that you met about something. She has a good channel in Kyiv. So I wanted to ask you about that meeting, and are you planning to do something together? Dennis?
We have a mutual friend and he helped arrange it. We just met and talked over coffee. It was me, Maria, and our friend Oleg. That's basically it. And as for the rest, well, it wouldn't be right for me to talk about it on air, would it?
Well, of course not. I was just saying after that with Maria, she said that you spent almost 4 hours together and that she got a tremendous pleasure from talking with you. And I thought you would do some joint broadcasts. That's why I asked. Ask Dennis who is to blame for the breakdown of agreements and peace in Istanbul. If it's Ukraine, then it turns out that Russia wanted peace all this time, but Zelensky and Europe with Biden were against it.
No, Zelensky and Biden opposed it, so saying Russia supported it is amusing. So it turns out Russia is a peacemaker now. Look, Victoria Nuland gave an interview the other day to a journalist, I think from Bild or somewhere. The interview is on YouTube. She was asked who interfered, and Victoria Nuland, a top Democratic Party and globalist curator of Ukraine, answered clearly. And when Zelensky started asking what he should do, we, that is Biden's team and the UK, were categorically against it. Then Boris Johnson came and basically said, no guys, don't do it, we'll give you money, we'll give you weapons. In the end, they didn't give anything. And today, what happened, happened. But after all this, who? The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky? No Johnson or Nuland could have stopped the fighting. If he'd firmly decided to end the war, I would have ended it in his place. Back then, I wouldn't have allowed it, but if the situation had already happened, it needed to be ended as quickly as possible. I didn't think the war would last, not even 4 years or months. Everyone expected it to end in a week, like in Georgia.
Thank you, Dennis. I have a question, and I absolutely don't want to offend you or hurt you in any way. Please understand me correctly. Regarding exactly what it turns out, that Russia is a peacemaker. Some people even compare your rhetoric to that of Anatoly Shari. Tell me, first of all, do you follow what he says? And most importantly, what differences do you personally see?
Yes, actually, in everything. First, I'm not a scoundrel. Second, I'm not a media killer. Third, I don't create fakes, even about Anatoly Shari. And I just told you about the case with my mother. When the security service of Ukraine broke into the apartment that morning, Anatoly Shari was spreading fakes about me all day. The most despicable fakes in Photoshop. That's what Anatoly Shari did. So it makes you wonder if he's connected to Ukrainian special services. It's just a thought. I have no evidence. That's the first thing. The second thing is if someone puts it like this, me and Shari, that we're close, that we're on the same side, that's someone who hasn't listened to me, hasn't listened to Shari, or listens but doesn't understand us. Shari is a supporter, a fan of Stalin. In my opinion, Shari always took a blatantly pro-Russian stance in all his activities. Shari left Ukraine as a nobody. Then he suddenly got rich with a certain kind of rhetoric. I made a name for myself in Ukraine and left because of pressure, not just left and then started some kind of activity. You see, only a complete idiot could see any analogies here. I'll put it very mildly.
Thank you. So when you just said that you left under pressure, Dennis, do you mean that if there hadn't been any pressure, you probably would have stayed in Ukraine? Did I hear you right?
Why would I have left? If I were leaving because of the war, I likely would have gone before it began. That's what a lot of people I know did. Some of them even left a couple of days before. But why would I leave if my business was running? What would be the point of leaving?
Well, I just remember now when you say that Balashov, who said almost the same thing. Well, of course.
Well, he started having problems earlier. His property was seized. Even earlier, he had court cases. That's a different story. But Balashov is exactly the same. Of course, well, you see these haters, the ones who see analogies with Shariam, they just don't understand anything at all. Saying we need peace in Ukraine now is seen as nearly Kremlin propaganda, just like Shariam. And you know, I brushed my teeth this morning too, just like that hater who wrote about me, so that's it. So now he's like me, just like Shari. Or what's the logic here? It's pointless to discuss this. Honestly, after over 3 years, everyone already understands and knows everything.
A question for Dennis. Are the recent missile attacks a kind of response to the Ukrainian side's unwillingness to negotiate? So does it mean if you don't want to sign, we can strike Ukraine like this, or is it not exactly like that?
They have attacked Ukraine and will continue. How long will the war last? I'll repeat, This adds to people's discontent and worsens the humanitarian catastrophe. Many outside Ukraine don't grasp how severe the disaster is. You know, right now in Miami, it's the coldest it's been in almost 100 years. It's really cold in Miami. As we found out in the last broadcast, there's no heating in Florida, so everyone here is already panicking, in shock. Imagine minus 20 in Kiev and across Ukraine with no heating or electricity. For people who don't live there, it's just unbelievable. Trump said it directly. Trump says, I honestly don't know how people survive there. He said, this is not life. And I want there to be life in Ukraine, but with war, there can't be life. It's a fact.
Dennis, what do you think? We talk a lot about whether it's possible, not even friendship, but at least some kind of good, let's say, honest relations between peoples. We see how society in Russia is splitting, or rather has split into two camps, so to speak, and there are divisions in Ukraine as well. What do you think? Those who, let's say, return to Ukraine after the war ends, how much will they be accepted by the society that is currently in Ukraine?
Well, we'll find out and see. Personally, in my view, such a question shouldn't even be on the agenda. I agree that it will be on the agenda. I don't know why I wouldn't agree. For some part of society, it will be an issue, the part that's being pumped up with propaganda today. Propaganda is exactly saying, like you hear in Ukraine today, don't do this, you shouldn't do that, don't come here, you're not Ukrainians. I understand, but what are the criteria? I lived through 8 months of war and left due to pressure and persecution. Do I meet the criteria to return? Who should I ask for permission to live my life? It's absurd that in 2026 we're still discussing this. Sadly, I agree there's a lot of absurdity.
I'm saying that today, probably everything is absurd. There's a lot of absurdity in what we're talking about. And to imagine that we would even be talking about this, well, hypothetically, 10 years ago, this would have been impossible. People would have thought we were crazy and wondered what we were talking about.
Yes, come on, Dennis. If Ukraine had agreed to a neutral status and recognized a special status for Donbass as part of Ukraine, then there wouldn't have been a war. Ukraine, to the delight of the West, decided to sacrifice itself. Do you agree with this statement or not?
I'm in favor of a neutral status. I wasn't at the table. I'm not sure if that would have saved us, but I know for sure a successful, wealthy Ukraine integrated into the global economy would have. But would the Minsk agreements have saved us? Well, I know for sure the Minsk agreements were definitely better than what we have now. Whether they would have saved us or not, I don't know, and nobody knows for sure. Only a successful Ukraine could have saved us. I stand by that.
I didn't quite understand. Your question to Dennis? A neutral question for Dennis. Elon Musk will enter France following a voluntary invitation from Macron. And what should Dennis ask?
I haven't read it yet, but I know Musk is being summoned to court in April. And about Macron, it's not interesting, but if it happens, Macron will try to persuade him, let's censor information and we won't bother you.
Tell me, Dennis, is burning people in Odessa terrorism? In the Soviet Union, they bombed the drama theater in Mariupol. Is that terrorism? Those are my two questions.
Alexander, honestly, this has been going on in Ukraine since 2013, 2014. Bembili and Bembas, 8 years, May 2nd in Odessa.
You mean this question? What were you doing for 8 years? Yes.
We can't discuss this with you today. It's not interesting.
How often do you answer questions like this, Dennis?
I haven't answered anything about Maidan for a long time. It's not interesting, so I don't pay attention to things like that.
Should he? Ask Dennis. Should Israel extradite Mindic at Ukraine's request as part of friendly international relations? And in general, are there friendly international relations between Ukraine and Israel?
Israel does not extradite its own citizens, and there's nothing to discuss here.
And regarding Israel-Ukraine relations, do you have any comments on how friendly these relations are or not? From your point of view,
these are definitely not friendly relations, just neutral relations.
Unfortunately,
of course.
Why don't Ukrainians themselves notice the speeches of Merz and Orban about not joining the European Union? Dennis surely knows more about this than others.
Of course, I know we share translations, give speeches, and publish them, but it depends on where people get their information. Do you think the media, which are completely controlled by these Sarasiats or President Zelensky's office, will tell people about this? Of course not, but it's been said directly and very clearly.
Dennis, if you're not discussing the Epstein scandal with Dennis, I'm not sure what else we should discuss, Dennis.
At this moment, I don't know.
How interesting this is for you, Dennis. All weekend and early week, that's all anyone's talked about. And even those who are, let's say, more politically engaged, more focused, for example, on the situation in the Middle East or on the European situation. But today, everyone is talking about these very files because the scandal, well, it's been a scandal for a while. I mean, these latest files that have been released. And there are a lot of mentions, and as I understand it, those mentions are just mentions, not really connected to anything, just mentions there. Someone said something about Putin somewhere, and that's considered a mention. They counted all the mentions, how many times Putin, Trump were mentioned, and so on and so on. Did you review all this? How interested are you, and how much did you look into it? Or maybe the experts or commentators who discuss it?
No, experts don't exist for me in this life. If someone calls themselves an expert, it immediately raises big doubts for me and is a red flag. I carefully study these 3 million pages. Thank you.
As if you actually study them yourself.
Well, of course, whatever I come across, I read it using artificial intelligence. I try to understand the interpretation. There are things there that need to be compared a lot.
A lot of fakes.
A lot is blown out of proportion. As you correctly said, just because someone is mentioned, that's not an accusation. If some scoundrel says something about me, that doesn't mean I'm connected to him. People try to take something out of it, each for themselves, but today is also the information age. I treat this absolutely calmly. There was an interesting moment there. Is this about Alexandra and Israel? She asked if Putin wrote to someone denying he was Putin, or if Putin supposedly said Zelensky is controlled by Israelis. That really affected me.
What does it mean that Zelensky is controlled?
Because Zelensky follows Israel? I truly think Putin believed that.
Are you being serious right now, Dennis? Yes.
Yes, Putin really thought so. The idea that Zelensky controls Israel is absolute nonsense, but the fact that Putin thought so was even before Zelensky became president. They believed Israel was grooming him to be Ukraine's president as part of a global scheme.
Tell me, why do you think you believed it was possible that Israel was preparing Zelensky?
That it was possible?
So why do you think Putin believed that?
I'll tell you, because again, the school, the KGB, and the Soviet mentality to some extent, I'm even looking at myself. That is, when someone unexpected appears somewhere, a black swan, we can call it that, to some extent, someone is definitely preparing him, someone is definitely behind him. Putin, the KGB, Russians, our people, and Ukrainians all think this way. There's always something, that's it. They don't understand that things can just happen. They always think someone is behind it. That's why I truly believe Putin thought this way.
I have a question. When did he stop thinking this way, he or others, and why?
Why did he stop thinking this way during his presidency? All of Ukraine's actions toward Israel speak to this. Nothing was happening, and that's basically it. That's enough.
When you say Ukraine's actions toward Israel, do you mean voting at the United Nations or something else? No.
But that's about the United Nations vote. Then you remember there was a situation where they didn't let people in for Rosh Hashanah, and there were some nuances there. It really looks like the person running Ukraine is controlled by Israel, but that's ridiculous. Did you see any kind of alliance, any kind of deep economic partnership, any kind of visa-free travel? None of that happened.
You brought up this topic, so I want to ask what you think. Many people say that Volodymyr Zelensky, does not associate himself, does not consider himself Jewish, but considers himself more of a Ukrainian. I don't get how you can choose to see yourself as someone. You already are Russian, Ukrainian, Jewish, Tatar, or Georgian. How can you not consider yourself that? And some people say he has no choice. He is forced to say that he is not Jewish but Ukrainian because there is anti-Semitism in Ukraine and he can't do otherwise. There are such opinions too. What would you say to me about this?
Let's go over this again. We keep discussing this topic. There is no anti-Semitism in Ukraine, not the kind of anti-Semitism that existed in the Third Reich. In Ukraine, there is a handful of idiots pumped up by the internet, an insignificant handful of idiots, but very active, who create the impression of anti-Semitism. Yes, there is everyday anti-Semitism. It exists, it has always existed, and there is everyday anti-Semitism in Russia as well, so there's no need to blow this topic out of proportion. Zelensky doesn't seem to self-identify in any way. But when a person whom everyone knows is Jewish, and there's nothing wrong with that, puts on a vishivanka, then, excuse me, from the outside, it's just funny, and people laugh at that. This is pandering to the not very smart common folk. That's what he's doing. When he goes to a synagogue, even non-Jews in a synagogue put on a kippah, like during some event, or in Israel at the Western Wall. He doesn't do that. It's demonstrative, it's a matter of principle, but again, I don't want to dig into this. It's his personal business. I'm just looking at it from the outside, thank you. I know that Kolomoisky told him, well, listen, at least observe Shabbat, you'll see, then maybe you'll go further. But apparently, that didn't really appeal to him, and so on and so forth. That's why, by the way, he behaves like a person who doesn't identify himself in any way. I think he doesn't identify himself as either Jewish or Ukrainian. That's my personal opinion.
As who then, Dennis?
I think he hasn't found himself. He's a person who hasn't found himself, who hasn't answered that question for himself.
We're slowly getting back to the question about Denis Yelisevich's Israeli passport.
No, I'm not going to ask that.
I'm joking.
Arestovich said that if he becomes the president of Ukraine, he will go straight to Putin and settle everything. Have you heard anything about this or not?
He mentioned this on Sobchak's show.
Dennis, how likely do you think a meeting between Putin and Zelensky, as recently discussed, will actually happen? I mean, a direct, if not strictly bilateral meeting. So, hypothetically, when they meet with each other, whether it's with Trump or someone else in Ukraine or in Kyiv, how likely do you think that is?
Honestly, I don't believe in a meeting between Zelensky and Putin at all. I just don't believe it. And by the way, regarding what Zelensky did there, I'm ready to explain it. This needs to be explained to people since it's clear that Canada probably dominates your audience. People should realize that when Zelensky says he's willing to meet Putin, it's because he knows Putin won't agree, which is what Putin does. Putin even said, come to Moscow.
Yes.
Zelensky won't go to Moscow, which is why he can make these statements. He knows it won't happen and is just appealing to the public, acting like he's ready while implying the other side isn't.
No, wait. Well, Dennis, wait. Let's try to be objective. Do you think Vladimir Zelensky could have gone to Moscow? I'm asking you.
Yes, he should have called Trump, asked him publicly, guaranteed his safety both in fact and publicly, and flown to Moscow for negotiations. By doing this, he would have cornered the KGB, since the KGB knows Zelensky is making these statements. Putin refuses to meet Zelensky, and Zelensky says he won't meet with Putin. Now imagine Zelensky says, I'm going to Moscow, let's set a date. The KGB would be cornered by this unexpected move. But for now, he's very predictable to them. They know his actions and steps 10 years ahead, or at least 10 months ahead for sure.
But what about predicting Zelensky when there's a certain group of people who say they consider Volodymyr Zelensky a hero? When offered a way out at the war's start, he said, I don't need a taxi, I need help. Yes, well, something like that. Maybe I'm not saying it exactly right, so he's not as predictable as he seems. That's not my question. It's just because we're talking about this topic.
These legends are spread by the press to promote Volodymyr Zelensky, similar to Churchill. You didn't mention Goncharenko or his PS speech. He was on your channel, right, Alexei?
By the way, I also want to ask about that. And moreover, I want to ask you if you will come to us together with Goncharenko. With pleasure.
I will gladly come to you with Goncharenko, but that's about Churchill. Goncharenko realized it after about 4 years, which is his responsibility. If you want to know why he told everyone about Volodymyr Zelensky and what's happening in Ukraine. About the taxi, I'll explain how it works. I know Zelensky and can tell you how it works. That's a guy thing. In my understanding, it's a person who's probably still trying to prove to himself that he's cool and wants to show it to others. Maybe he has some insecurities, I don't know, but that's exactly the story. He didn't run away for Ukraine, as people say. He didn't run away for himself, but I'll say it again. I didn't run away either. Many Ukrainian men didn't flee. They went to the front to defend. That makes them far more heroic than Zelensky. Zelensky was protected by special forces and the government quarter was blocked. What danger is there? Halina Nuland confirmed this. I mentioned it on your show and for years on mine, and former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali did as well. Bennett guaranteed it. He was a very successful and quick mediator. I'm not his fan, but here I have to admit he spoke with Putin and through Bennett. Putin assured Zelensky of his personal safety, guaranteeing he wouldn't be killed, which was necessary given the circumstances. Without Bennett's guarantee, Zelensky might have fled. No one wants to ask this, so it's blown out of proportion. I'll say it again, they hyped him up, the Spanish king, some prince, people took pictures, Boris Johnson showed off, British intelligence hyped him, and the press called him Churchill, but this Churchill quickly deflated. You know, it's funny to me as an adult who understands this a bit when people use these cliches. It's all just funny. Honestly, give me a weapon instead of a taxi. They only act in their own interest, never Ukraine's.
One more question. Well, are you being unfair to Volodymyr Zelensky? Why? After all, even if Zelensky agreed to meet, let's say, with Putin in Moscow or somewhere else, but Putin is calling him an illegitimate president, so how can he meet with him?
So what's the question?
Well, if Putin doesn't want to meet with someone who's illegitimate, even if Zelensky wants to.
They said to meet, so let them come to Moscow. We agree.
Honestly, I can hardly imagine it at all. Once again, I'm saying I'm not there in any way. A fan of Zelensky or Vladimir Putin, but still credit where it's due. Yes, I mean, honestly, I don't think Putin has acted offensively. I called Zelensky. Yes, he tends to use his last name knowing himself. We remember well what Zelensky said.
Good point. You granted his wish.
And for me, it's just no. I'll say it again, I'm abstracting from any sympathies there. No, I don't have any sympathies, but for people to meet, well, I understand it's diplomacy, but after someone wishes you dead. Before that, there were also several times when he was called unpleasant names, so honestly, in my opinion, Putin is actually very vindictive in this regard. No, not a good person.
Of course, I could be wrong.
Of course.
No, I completely agree with you. That's a very good point. You must stay dignified in any situation, especially as president. He stooped so low by swearing at him. I said then, we may all think of Putin that way, but a president can't act like that. At the very least, for one reason, you can't escalate things and put the people at risk with actions like that. Step down from the presidency, resign, and then, yes, you can curse at Putin all you want. Go on YouTube every day, 10 hours a day. But right now, you had no right to do that.
Yes, Putin uses Dmitry Medvedev as a lightning rod who freely says whatever he wants, and you can't really blame him. It's clear
That he
probably most likely is speaking with the words of Vladimir Putin, but yes.
He replaced Dmitry Medvedev, replaced Zhirinovsky. The role, well, yes.
What Dennis would change today? I watched your debates. I live in Kyiv. I have a great attitude toward Dennis. I agree with every word. What Dennis would change today in his debates with Kedmi, even monotonously repeating the same narratives, well, that's what is meant. Yakov didn't look very good, but nevertheless, he tried to pressure Dennis by knowing people's last names. If you spoke to him today, would you act the same as before or differently? And regarding Goncharenko, what is the main point where you disagree? If, for example, it were a debate between you and Alexei Goncharenko.
Let's not share any secrets about Goncharenko so people stay curious if anything happens. I have nothing personal against Goncharenko. It's just politics, not enmity. I've forgotten about Kedmi many times. That wasn't a debate. Kedmi just read from a manual. There were no questions, answers, or opposition, just reading. Monotonous and endless, as noted.
Goncharenko is a Ukrainian patriot.
Goncharenko is a patriot, Goncharenko.
The endless question about the joint broadcast of Denis Elisevich with Mikhailo Svetov. In my opinion, we answer this question every single broadcast that the broadcast is possible. But the point is, there is actually no disagreement between Mikhailo Svetov and Denis Elisevich in their positions. I mean, nothing fundamental.
I asked Mikhailo Svetov. He's fine with it. If Denis agrees, we can do it.
Well, yes, the question is,
what is here?
I'll write to Svetov today, if you don't mind, to Denis. Yes, all right. Ask Dennis. And why doesn't Zelensky cancel his law banning negotiations with Putin? Kishkatenko, or is he afraid to admit his own foolishness? Well, I don't know what negotiations are being discussed. By the way,
Also, yes, that's a good one. Yes.
Well, he issued it. I think it was, what's it called? A presidential decree, yes, about the ban on negotiations. Yes, I think it still hasn't been cancelled. Later, I think, somehow it was written differently. They didn't specify who he targeted, whether he was supposed to go somewhere. Well, there was some other document there. Well, that was also utter nonsense.
you go on the Liberty channel, right? It's called Liberty.
Yeah, don't watch it. So it's a bilingual channel, and one of its features is that the journalist is genuinely a native Ukrainian speaker, while the guests are often Russian speakers. So the broadcast is bilingual. That's actually the channel's thing. That's all. If I'm told to speak only Ukrainian, I'll assess the situation. If speaking Russian means I won't be invited, I simply won't participate. In everyday life, if someone addresses me in Ukrainian, and it's always been like that when I lived in Ukraine, I always replied in Ukrainian. It's really not a problem at all.
We had a situation like that. We had a concert in Canada. I forgot the name. Vopli Vodopliasovi. Yes, 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 yes. And there's the lead singer, Ole Skripka, right? I think he's the leader of that band. And when they had a concert in Canada, we offered to do an interview. We wanted to sell more tickets so that more people would come. And suddenly the organizer tells me, yes, but he won't speak. Ole Skripka won't speak Russian. I don't speak Ukrainian, and even if Dennis does, Alexander could speak Ukrainian and you could respond, or vice versa. If I don't understand something, Dennis, I'll look stupid, and I don't want that. And I said, well, listen, it's impossible. But you guys, I said, no, listen, but I don't speak Ukrainian. And in the end, you found us. There was this guy, the host Artyom, he's from Crimea. He spoke Ukrainian very well. And so we did this show, meaning both Skripka spoke Ukrainian and Artyom Liberman spoke Ukrainian. So our listeners and viewers could understand. I don't know, because some people know Ukrainian and some don't. So we took this step, and I don't know today if it was right or not, because most of the audience probably didn't really understand this conversation. Was it the right thing to do?
Well, in principle, if the organizer or director says that it will only be in Ukrainian, I have a negative attitude toward that. Why? There's no reason to make a fuss over something that's not an issue. Oleg Skripka speaks and understands Russian. He speaks it perfectly and understands it perfectly.
So it's not about principle.
Well, look, I wasn't involved there. I suspect that, yes, I don't want to say anything for sure, but I suspect that, yes. And here, the same thing is happening in Ukraine today. 100% of the population of Ukraine understands Russian. That's it, period. Let's move on. This issue shouldn't be politicized, but it was. With AI earpieces and programs instantly translating any language, only a fool would make an issue of this. This issue shouldn't even be on the agenda. It's just a way to understand each other, but it's also a way to implement a strategy of divide and rule. And they use it successfully, politicize it, and stir things up.
Someone wrote that many people from Russia listen to you, and they thank you for speaking Russian. Those who support Ukraine watch you from Russia, and for them it's fundamentally important to hear the perspective of a Ukrainian patriot, but in Russian. It's not because they don't like the Ukrainian language, but simply because they wouldn't understand what's being said to them. It's crucial to listen not to their demagogues or propaganda, but to those who understand Ukrainian.
People here also don't understand this. Dennis and I talked about going to Moscow. Another topic is monuments, streets, and the Russian language. Imagine if they said we're at war with Putin and his regime because he attacked us, but Russian doesn't belong to Putin. It's always been part of Ukraine. Would that make the KGB's job easier or harder? It's definitely harder, but now they're making the KGB's job easier by fueling propaganda. They just use real news and show it in Russia. No need to create anything anymore.
Thanks for the subtitles, Alexei, but I think I'll understand the Ukrainians better here. I absolutely do not support this policy of canceling culture, language, and so on, but honestly, I completely understand the Ukrainians in this regard. This is really, let's say, to put it mildly, not love, but simply put hatred for everything related to Russia. It's quite understandable, not justified, but at least understandable, and that's what I've been paying attention to lately. Things are happening that are hard to explain. For example, the situation with the political commentator Yevgeny Kiselyov, who spent and worked a huge part of his life in Ukraine. Today, essentially, this person is already cancelled. And this rhetoric that, in fact, the only good Russian is the one who is, let's say, sitting in a trench with a rifle and fighting on the side of the armed forces of Ukraine. That's a good Russian. Otherwise, all the rest are bad Russians. It doesn't matter if it's Navalny or others. Yes, they're all bad Russians. You can't trust them. And this hatred, unfortunately, from what I see, really is growing. But I'll say it again, for example, in this regard, I understand.
They are freezing like that. People, I'm Ukrainian, so it turns out, but according to you, I'm not Ukrainian, or Putin didn't bomb me, or Moses isn't bombing me. No.
No, I mean specifically the Russians.
No, so if you understand Ukrainians, 50% of Ukrainians, the Russian language is the language their mother spoke to them in childhood. So for them, it's their native language. What's the problem? So are you rejecting yourself as a person in favor of propaganda?
No. That part. Emotionally, I understand them, but I don't justify them. Not at all. I'm not saying it's right.
That it should be this way. Guys,
let's demolish Pushkin's monuments. Let's hate everyone who sometimes says no, absolutely not. But I'm saying that emotionally in this regard,
But let me tell you something. Dennis, what's happening in Canada, in Vancouver, Dennis Elisevich probably doesn't know about this because he doesn't live in Canada. Here I meet people who came from Ukraine during the war, before the war, so to speak. I know a lot of Russian Jews who have supported Ukraine from the very beginning, as soon as the war started. But when it starts like this, don't speak Russian. Do this here, Sasha.
I absolutely do not accept or understand those who left Ukraine. I categorically do not accept this. I'm only talking about those who are currently living in Ukraine and suffering under the bombs. I'm talking about these people, but by no means about those who left, for example, for various reasons. It doesn't matter if they left a long time ago, not just during the war, but even before that. And then, to put it mildly, these stories really start happening. I don't understand.
Well, Konstantin Alexandrovich Borovoy, whom I spoke with recently, said he fully supported Zelensky at the start of the war, but now would ask him to resign. Yes, as Borovoy said, he has his own views. Let me give an example. I think, Dennis, I told you, Dennis Elisevich, we went to one of those well-known restaurants here. Well, it's a chain. Yes, I don't want to name it. We went there with the guys. I was interviewing a young man who recently came from Ukraine to have him on the radio. He's a journalist there. And so we're sitting and talking. I think I told you we went in and there was a hostess. Well, the girl who greets people, right? I see she has a name tag on her jacket, let's say. For example, it says Oksana, and I assume she speaks Russian since her name is Oksana. At least that's what I think. So I spoke to her and I noticed that, well, I felt like something was off with her. And as a result, we sat down at the table. We were speaking Russian. Well, maybe that guy doesn't speak Ukrainian, but I don't. And we started talking, and suddenly the restaurant managers came up to us and said, you know, I'm going to ask you not to speak Russian, but this guy doesn't speak English. He just arrived. I said, why are Canadians telling me this? I said, why? She said, well, there are people here who find it unpleasant. I said, wait, I have a question for you. I've been living in Canada for over 30 years. My native language is Russian. Did I attack Ukraine? No. Did I do something bad to Ukraine? No. Moreover, we've had it on the radio almost every day since the beginning of the war. What's it called, Dennis? No to war. What's that slogan called, or what, Dennis? Where was it written, no to war? I mean, I'm doing much more than even those Ukrainians who came here. I understand them. They don't want children to die. And so by promoting something here on the radio, on television today, when these people spoke to me, they asked why I didn't have the right to speak since it emotionally affects this girl. Well, if they try to suppress it like that, everything happens the other way around. They want to do more, to say and do better, but it turns out worse. It just gets worse. Borovoy mentioned it used to involve hands and feet, but now it's different. If you want them to be people, well, how do your allies support you? Is that really right? To answer that, honestly, it's not good.
Many people think so, and Dennis might agree, though I'm not sure. They blame Volodymyr Zelensky. Because if we remember, at the very beginning of the war, he gave an interview in Russian to 3 or 4 Russian journalists, and this interview was organized by Mr. Zigar. And so, when he was asked today about how possible it was and actually why it was necessary to do it, he said that Volodymyr Zelensky had hoped that in Russia, well, people would really take it to heart and try to do something. Up to, let's say, overthrowing the current government and so on and so forth. Well, maybe it sounded naive, but still. But he also said that it seemed to him that after nothing happened and instead there was Bucha and so on, actually, now Zelensky has this idea that there are no good Russians. There are only those who either stay silent.
No, he doesn't think that. Zelensky only speaks Russian, while my family is fully bilingual. But Zelensky is strictly Russian speaking. He ran his whole campaign in Russian and recently slipped a Russian word at a press conference before correcting himself. He's entirely Russian speaking. The interface on all the computer programs is in Russian. The entire president's office speaks Russian. It's absurd. It's funny. I know where this is coming from. I know this technique and I strongly condemn it. I'd never handle state policy that way. We lost because of such foolish actions. As you said, it's also personal. Later on, by the way, this Zigari, I think, interviewed Nuland, whom I told you about. He decided, so it's personal, right? Okay, you don't want to cooperate, then I'll show you. Now, it's not state policy, but a personal issue between Putin and Zelensky. Trump also says it's personal between them. I don't want personal problems to impact my family or country. Handle personal matters privately.
I actually think there's more personal stuff going on there than.
Well, I think so too, that right now it's more personal over there. That one's a St. Petersburg punk, but this one?
Interesting. We started talking about Oleg Skripka. Yeah, I didn't know. So, Dennis, thank you for telling me. Someone wrote to us here. What? A woman wrote, I was filming, well, I was probably the camera woman, Oleg Skripka, at the House of Cinema in Kyiv in 1988. He was absolutely Russian speaking. He came to Ukraine as an adult from Russia. I was sure he didn't know Russian. Do you believe me?
No. Well, there was that famous movie, oh God, what's it called? About the election. Oh God, the one where they filmed in apartments and they made it Day of the Election. Oh God, Day of the Election. He performed there with his band and speaks perfect Russian. Thank you.
Well, you see, so yeah, ask Denis Elisevich if he theoretically became the president of Ukraine after the war, would he have any claims against Europe and the Democrats in the United States? For the fact that Ukrainians were bought like natives for beads?
I won't answer a scoundrel. Ukrainians were bought like natives. Who bought whom? Where's the money? The cash register. That's it.
Well, yeah. Just a second, Dennis. Hold on. Maybe Dennis often talks about globalists. To be on Ukraine's side, does it mean to be on the side of globalists or not? I mean, not colonialists who dream of world domination in a narrow-minded way. So how would you answer this question?
I didn't understand the question, but supporting Ukraine means supporting Ukraine. We have a part of society in Ukraine that receives money from globalists and wholeheartedly supports Ukraine as they think, building an anti-Russia on paper. So one doesn't interfere with the other. Being for Ukraine is being for Ukraine. But what kind of Ukraine you support, that's a serious question. And I wouldn't demand anything from anyone, not from the Democrats. I would trade and cooperate with everyone. Ukraine is not in a position to demand anything from anyone.
Well, yes. They're writing here.
That Zigary, by the way, is a very smart person. I agree with that too, but I absolutely don't consider him an anti-Semite. And regarding Zigary, watch his interview with Yekaterina Gordeeva. He also comments on anti-Semitism and his dislike of Israel. In fact, there he explains in detail and correctly his attitude toward Israel and Palestine.
Ask Dennis who financed Maidan, and on the identification site in Ukraine, who financed it. Dennis, thank you.
Alexander, there are no more questions except from these brainwashed Russians.
Maidan was financed. I'm still choosing the most.
Maidan was financed by United States Agency for International Development. Yes, financed by United States Agency for International Development, Soros, globalists. What else? I was at Maidan. I gave my own money there. What else?
By the way, someone asked, here's a question. Were you at Maidan? That was the next question.
Yes, I was at Maidan, but not for Soros or the globalists.
And about the globalists and Soros, what's your view on them? Do they have a future? How much can they damage the world, which is already damaged today?
They've already damaged it. I think now their decline is coming.
Why do you think they're declining?
Well, it's already obvious, even to those who didn't understand anything, by the way, after the Epstein files, the Epstein files will really help with that. Their policies clearly caused a widespread crisis. So, Merz, when he said Ukraine isn't joining the European Union, there was also a press conference. He was talking about something completely different. It's time to open up the economy, time to be more liberal. The guys have started to move. And this is what globalism has led to. European leftist leaders will soon be replaced through democratic elections, leading to major changes.
Do you mean this fall?
Well, in France, I think the elections are in 2027. I need to check where else and when. But I think Merz will be sent into early retirement and Staramer too. And little by little, things will get better. But the other problem is what? These left-wing globalists have skewed the world too much in one direction. And now the right-wingers will come and swing it too far the other way. Many voters will still be dissatisfied. That's how it happens, unfortunately.
Dennis, can you explain the difference between left-wing and right-wing globalists? I'm just curious. Actually, the topic is quite big, but if you could briefly...
Globalists are only left-wing, radical left. They set the agenda so that the state controls everything, completely interferes in people's lives. They push the idea that you don't need to own anything, just rent an apartment, a car, everything. They promote the agenda that anyone can be brought into Western civilization. We've seen that all of this has failed. Well, in short, there's a lot to it, and it's definitely not something I can explain quickly.
Well, yeah, I understand the topic is really big. It's just that usually the left are called globalists. I just haven't heard the right being called that.
Who said globalists are right? I didn't say globalists are right.
No, the right will come, globalists, you say.
No, I said the right will come, and that's it. Then they're only leftists.
And that's it. Then that's all. The question is off the table.
Don't say that, please. Trump has 3 years, right? 3 years of his, well, maybe more, but I'm talking about what's happening now. What do you think? How much can he accomplish? Some people say he won't have time to do much, but I think considering how he's acting now, he'll actually manage to do quite a lot. It's only been a year, but there have been a tremendous number of changes. I don't know if you have an American passport or not, but if you were an American citizen, would he be your president or not? And what do you think? How much will he be able to accomplish in the 3 years of his presidency?
I'm convinced he'll do a lot. And actually, when he became president, he had a very broad program, including a geopolitical one. And by the end of his term, basically, during his term, I hope he completes it, the world will change a lot for the better, I would say, beyond recognition. That's what I believe in. And I believe that by the end of his term, Putin will either start to fade away completely or Putin simply won't be around anymore. The president of Russia.
Do you mean in the past 3 years?
Yes, by the end.
In the text about the passport, does Dennis have an Israeli passport?
I'm joking.
I'm trying to lighten the mood a little.
You're just messing around now, really? No. I just didn't try to lighten things up a little at all. Dennis, this isn't serious. You don't know.
I'm saying this again just to lighten up our broadcast a little. Otherwise, we're starting to get a bit too gloomy.
It's a joke.
Dennis, I apologize.
No, why is it that what Denis Elisevich just said is not a joke at all?
No, I mean my question about the Israeli passport.
I asked Dennis over these 3 years how much Trump could accomplish, and Dennis answered that he could accomplish quite a lot.
And moreover,
By the end of the term, Dennis said that a lot could change. It's so serious that there will be other presidents, others.
honestly, I don't believe in that. But the fact is,
That we'll see. We'll see.
we'll see. Tomorrow we have an interesting topic.
By the way, I actually want to ask Dennis something about tomorrow. I'm really curious. How would you act in this situation? So tomorrow we'll have two people, right? Leon Weinstein, who calls himself a Trump supporter, and Alexander Goldfarb, who was connected to Soros. He was friends with Berezovsky and accused Channel 1 of being involved in Litvinenko's murder, and he stole a lot of money from Channel 1. Interestingly, these people left the Soviet Union in the 1970s. Dennis, you weren't even born then, were you? They both moved to Israel. Their biographies are very similar. They're almost the same age. They both served in the Israel Defense Forces, and they both moved to the United States. One lives in New York, the other lives in Los Angeles. And if one is a Trump supporter, the other is anti-Trump. One, so to speak, says that Trump is turning the republic into an empire. I mean, Alexander Goldfarb and Leon Weinstein says that he is the best friend of the empire, the republic. I'm really curious, how would you conduct such a debate?
Well, I would definitely take the position that Leon Weinstein takes.
I understand that. Dennis,
Here's what I can say, but I can't predict further. This is classic, and you'll likely have a good broadcast. Such a confrontation is very relevant now.
thank you. This will be very interesting for me. I'll send some clips later. I understand that you won't have time to watch the whole show, but I'm incredibly interested in your point of view on tomorrow's debates. Actually, I already know your point of view. You were right when you said you would be on Leon's side, but how much will that work out tomorrow? Because, as I said, this one and the other have different backgrounds. You know, it's like one was copied from the other. Yes, yes.
I think it will be more interesting than the air. The air will still be very good.
And I know that every time you come to us, there is no one indifferent to you. People felt the same way about Balashov, either loving or hating him passionately. And now I look at our chat, as Denis Soydevko said, I love our little chat. Yes, whenever I see it, I always wonder, where do they even come from? How do they get here and end up here? Really? It's a mystery to me. I'm struggling to find a question for you, Dennis, and can't even think of one decent enough that you won't say, well, Alexandra, are we really going to discuss this? And tell me, how would you name your debates or your stream or your conversation, like at least approximately the topic with Alexei Goncharenko?
For example, Ukraine's real politics.
Or the Ukraine of the future? The Ukraine of the future. I think that's very interesting. Do you think you will agree on this in the Ukraine of the future?
I won't say anything on purpose. Let's let Alexei agree or disagree. I specifically don't want to answer you. Thank you. We can say Alexei Goncharenko is a professional politician. Right after school, I'm not a politician, and I want to emphasize that. So let's see.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Yes, thank you for your honesty. First of all, if anything, sorry for maybe...
No, everything here is real.
Everything here is absolutely sincere and real.
Nothing else, of course.
Thank you so much. And if you, for example, came to the Israeli embassy, yes, Dennis, yes, what's going on?
Alexander?
Everything is about the passport. Everything leads to the passport. I would be the one, I would just hand over this passport much sooner.
Why the passport? Many people write Denisov presidents, so...
In Israel? Well, I hope not.
Well, who knows? Who knows? Maybe that's the case. Maybe we'll talk about it in the next broadcast.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you so much. Really, thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.